Today we're going to talk about the importance of brand. I'm Charlie, I come from investment banking and trading. Now I help companies with budget from $10 million to north of $100 million to clean up the CAC, increase their margin and scale profitably. So what is a brand initiative? I think we should start there. And by the way, please subscribe this because on the next episode, we're going to cover the leading and lagging indicator of brand impact and the reason why we need both of them. A lot of people claim that you can't track it. That's not true. Next episode will be a masterclass to explain you how you can track the impact of brands on your bottom line. We're going to cover the leading and lagging indicators, and I'll tell you why exactly we need both. We're going to go through use case like HubSpot versus Salesforce, how HubSpot actually slowly getting some market share from Salesforce. It's going to be a very exciting episode. But first, I felt that we needed to cover the question of what is brand before diving into the measurement. So what is brand? Brand builds preference. So a brand, put very simply, a brand should make your sales easier. That means more sales, faster sales, cheaper sales. So that is the first important point because, for example, you see a lot of brand initiatives which do not do that. So for example, funny TikToks or LinkedIn brand awareness campaigns are not necessarily real brand initiative because they not necessarily make sales easier. Actually, LinkedIn brand awareness can actually make it more expensive. But we'll cover that more in detail later. So Warren Buffett, the king of kings of investment, who actually retired a week ago, always focused on brand as a moat in his investment. And this is why he invested in Apple, for example. The main reason was brand. He keeps saying that the brand is your moat. So everything can be copyable. There's always going to be somebody who will be able to do your product for cheaper. But what the people can't replicate is your brand. And this is why brand is so important. And first, let's dive into the difference between B2C and B2B. So B2C buyers tend to buy a better version of themselves. They buy status. So they're going to buy something thinking that is going to improve my status. Why, for example, buying a BMW for a lot of people, it's a status, a bigger house, and jewelry, the new iPhone. Most of B2B purchases are, that are not necessarily about for status. The B2B buyers are a bit more different. They buy the choice they perceive the less risky, not especially the best one. And this is why it's super important because when you're a smaller brand and you want to be a contender against the biggest brand, well, you'll have to fight a lot more because the bigger brand is always perceived as less risky. Like, for example, Salesforce. Why do people buy Salesforce? Because everybody else does it. It makes the work for the sales team very easy because people will pick that one, not because especially is the best. I'm not judging the tool here. I'm just saying that it is perceived as the lower risk. And so people want to make sure that they take the right decision at their work and that they're not going to be put in a difficult situation later because they went for a little contender. But both buy on perception, and that's super important. You can have the best product, you're not going to be able to fight against a lower quality product that has a much stronger brand. So use case, I'd like to go into a McDonald use case. I'll go into the numbers in a second, but on the left what you see here is that brand helps to drive go-to-market effectiveness. The thing is that you can only sell to people who are willing to buy from you. And the people willing to buy from you will increase thanks to your brand. And the thing is, a lot of companies do that mistake of over-investing in sales and marketing, but they end up in complete diminishing return territory in that red area because they're spending more but not increasing the number of people willing to buy from them. And the only way to increase that is through brand. And so this is why you see that when you start to invest in brand, you're going to get more revenue for your cost. And in the end, it's going to make your go-to-market budget way more effective. So McDonald experienced that. The charts are coming from the paper Balancing Short and Long-Term Marketing Strategy from Binet, who's absolutely amazing. And what we saw is that between 2007 and 2011, McDonald increased. They were 100% into performance marketing. They increased their allocation to brand to 28%. And what we did see is that the revenue multiplied by 3 over those years. Those are indexed. This is why it started at 33 and ended up at 100 in total. And that most of the revenue was actually coming from brand. Binet suggests to invest about 60% of your budget in brand. If you're a B2B company, you are more likely to be spending 10% right now. So definitely, I wouldn't suggest to go straight to the 6%. As you can see, see McDonald didn't. You have to go it in an incremental way because you also have to understand what's working and what's not. And so you have to push a little more to a little more. But definitely there is a very strong case that at least 30% of your budget should go into brand. And so Airbnb experienced the same. There's a lot of videos that mention this, is they were 100% performance marketing, and when they start to push more in brand, that's where they start to see the revenue increasing. Now people are saying, hey, but that's B2C case, B2B is really different. Well, hold my beer, because we're going to go through 4 B2B examples of recent success stories. So we have HubSpot, we have Gong, we have Paddle, we have Clay. And HubSpot, for example, but massive content engine, blog, academy, case studies. They did a lot of weekly exec for leadership posts. They use a lot of customer testimonial as assets. They branded a funnel, the flywheel is coming from them. That helped them to build trust at scale and make them buying them feel like a safe bet. Again, as I said, they were fighting against Salesforce, and Salesforce were the easy choice, HubSpot wasn't. But they really successfully succeeded to change people's perception through all of their content. And it's also a great product. Actually, on the next episode on how to measure brand, we're going to cover the Salesforce HubSpot use case. Another one that's doing great for the moment is Gong. So Gong also very active on LinkedIn. They create a new category, which is always a great strategy when you enter a market. You don't want to improve a service, you want to create a new category. It's way easier to sell. And then they did a lot of executive and social motion, so executive were very active, and then also they had those famous Super Bowl ads, which were great. So what they succeeded to do is that you don't buy Gong, you join the movement. So preference makes a status here. I highly suggest you to actually read the book Courageous Marketing from Udi Ledger-Gore, who was the CMO of Gong. Now he's the chief evangelist, and that book was amazing. Paddle also, they did 95 events in 2004. They treat every update like a campaign, even new hires. So they go very public, and that's great because it creates familiarity with the brand. They're not just saying, hey, do you want to buy my product? No, they post a lot about story, what's happening in the company. And so they create that familiarity, and people start to know them better and feels that they know them, which increase the trust. They did also a lot of partner collabs, and founders also were posting weekly on LinkedIn. So why it works, as I explained, flood the market with relevance, familiarity, without burning ad spend. There are many ways. The Courageous Marketing from Udi covers that. There are many ways to build a brand very effectively with very small budget. And that's one of the big issues that people do, is that they're so focused on tracking that they do the brand initiative to paid, like LinkedIn brand awareness and things like this. And then the brand initiative becomes extremely expensive. But the reality is that if you're a bit creative about it, you can have amazing impact with very small spend. Organic, for example, if you succeed to do great content, you're going to have a lot of organic reach, way more than if you were paying for that reach. Another one very famous now, it's Clay. So again, they did a lot of user-generated content. They had a lot of internal evangelists posting daily. They did some strategic integration. They do a lot of product-led demos, like last week, for example, they did one in a helicopter. Again, that's the idea of like being able to create more reach by making something very unusual. So in the end, renting that helicopter might be much cheaper than actually paying for that reach. And they also did recently an AI hackathon. And so what they do is that they make the product very alive. Their GTM look like the users, and they became part of the workflow. So go-to-market budgets are often wasted on performance marketing and sales. So what is performance marketing? Is prospecting, retargeting, everything that you do expect to drive revenue now. And also, we also tend to overspend on the sales team. And the reason is because, as you look at this here, is that 95% of your market right now is not in market. And then you have 5% who is in market. But of those 5%, 4% are going to buy a brand they already know before starting the buyer journey. And only 1% will buy a brand they didn't know before starting the buyer journey. And so if you don't build a brand awareness, you're like fighting for that one little percent. And so this is why a lot of B2B companies go to market are completely ineffective and in complete diminishing return, is that they don't spend enough at the beginning educating those 95% to then be able to convert them later on. And by the way, another stat that we're going to see later is that a buyer who's ready to reach a salesperson in B2B is already 70% in the buyer journey, which means that they have already shortlisted their candidate. So if you don't have the right tool to be able to be shortlisted, you're just out of the game in the prospecting and retargeting game, and you're becoming completely ineffective. A big problem I often see is that brand is often the first thing that gets cut in budget when budget tightens, while in reality you should do the exact opposite. When budget are cut, you should cut is really like the bottom of the funnel. I know it feels counterintuitive, but the reason it feels counterintuitive is because you're looking at tracking, not measuring. So content is the new conversion tool. As I said, buyer journeys have changed. Companies stuck in lead gen and sales-led playbooks are leaking margin. Today, the prospects self-educate, they research, they compare. And that's first 70% of the buyer journey. So if you don't create familiarity, if you don't have great user-generated content, if you don't cover properly what you're solving and what your clients are saying about you, well, you're out of the shortlist. Unless you have a very big brand and you can sit on that. But if you're trying to make a name, you have to absolutely focus on content. So here I just put like 8 questions that you can use to create a content loop. So some you can ask for prospect, like where did you hear about us? What got your attention, made you want to know more? What problem were you hoping you could solve, and what have you tried before? What almost stopped you from talking to us? And then there are other questions that you can ask clients. What problem does your product solve for you today? How do you use it with your team day to day? What changed since using it? Any wins or results? If you had to explain us to a peer, what would you say? That is actually like a first good starting point. And actually what the thing is, the questions will depend on the first answers of your client. So there is a bit of discovery there that definitely will help you to get into it. One thing I see all the time, and you shouldn't do it, is hide content on your website. Don't do this. Your ideal customer are not going to go on your website to read your content unless already built a very strong familiarity with them. So make it easier. Put it where the people are. LinkedIn, social media, YouTube. It's extremely important to move your content where your buyers are. Don't hide it on your website. One thing that's extremely important to understand too is the baseline revenue, because the baseline revenue is key to your effective go-to-market. So what is the baseline? It's all revenue that comes without paid search, without retargeting, without lead gen ads. It's the demand that is really created by brand and by real intent, not spent. And the great thing about this, it means that you have a low CAC, high trust, faster sales. So if you want to have better margin and better close rates, you should stop chasing intent on the bottom of the funnel and start creating it. We're going back to the 5-95% rule. Only 5% of people are in market right now. 4% of them are going to pick a brand they already know. So you have to be there to educate the 95%. Otherwise, you won't be able to convert them. And also, you have to stop obsessing over trackability and build trust. Remember, brand builds preference. So a little call out I want to do here too is that LinkedIn brand awareness ads are not always brand initiatives. So there are some people who are using extremely well, who really create extremely good ads, not a lot of them, to create brand, to create a great content that could be great organically, but also push it through brand awareness to have more reach. Problem that I do see is a lot of companies just targeting and retargeting companies who are not ready to buy now, reminding them that the tool exists, but not the why. And so when you do this, first, the problem is that you're very highly likely to waste a lot of money, and so your customer acquisition cost will increase. And then there's no way for you to fight against another company that actually create content that is providing value. Remember, B2B buyers are risk averse and they self-educate. Brand is about more, faster, and cheaper sales. Just targeting company with a picture is not always helping you to do more, faster, and cheaper sales, and actually quite the opposite because of the CAC inflation. So there are a few brand initiative channels. You can have newsletters, you can have YouTube series, webinars, blogs, and SEO Hub. Problem with blogs and SEO Hub, as I explained, is that you shouldn't hide them. I think it's great for SEO, but be careful. It's not enough just to put them there. And then also, obviously, you can have customer stories and use case. And you have social media. As I explained, you have to be where people are. So LinkedIn for leadership. Although I start to see some decrease in effectiveness there, my impression is that paid content is like more pushed now than organic content on LinkedIn, which makes LinkedIn less interesting. But that's a personal point of view. And then you obviously have TikTok, Insta, YouTube Reels. You can create podcasts. You can have user-generated content. You can distribute it, influencer collaboration, and also, yeah, even recaps and behind the scene. That's great. When you do a video or an event, people love to see what's behind the scene. Again, it's that idea of creating more familiarity. I hope you enjoyed that episode. As I explained, next week we're going to deep dive of how to measure all of this, and it's not that difficult and definitely not impossible. If you have any recommendation on this video, please let me know. Please subscribe if you want to be updated on the next episode, and I see you later. Bye.